Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. Today we're looking at Cardano. Now, Cardano for me has been a really interesting one because like a lot of stocks, it only makes sense when you look back on what's happened, and you form opinions about what you think is going to happen, but then that changes, it switches up on you. And so for me, in most of my videos, I made comparisons from this time period for Cardano, kind of before the halving, to what we experienced almost during and while we were going through the halving. And afterwards I said, look, we got this strong move up, like we did back here. We broke new highs. I think we will probably continue to move on past this point once we have a pullback like we saw here. And now last time I made a video on Cardano, I had this white circle here that's supposed to represent the low after this peak. I had it back at this point. And then before that, I had it back even further. I had it down here. So as time's gone on, I thought, oh, that's perfect. We've got this really low point. Most likely we're going to see some kind of a rally. And to be fair, we did. I mean, when we were up here, I was like, nailed it. But then we obviously got this big, strong pull down, wiped a load of people out. And then I was like, okay, that's probably, we're going to see some kind of a recovery. We did see some kind of a recovery. We moved back up. And then at that point, I was kind of like, who knows? And then got it right, I guess. Or, well, I didn't get it wrong, at least. And we went down even lower. And we've now, once again, had a rally back up. And this is all happening from a range of 50 cents up to just under $1, basically. And bit of a side note, but if any of you have watched my Casper videos, I was terrible at calling them. And as soon as I changed my opinion, it flipped. Now, historically, I've actually been kind of decent with Cardano. Pretty accurate. You can watch those videos. Because a lot of the time, it wasn't that hard. I saw more or less this pattern playing out. And I projected the same thing to continue to happen. The first kind of hiccup that we had with that, strategy, I suppose, is that here when we kind of begin our comparison, we have our move up, we get a small pullback, and then we move ever so slightly higher. And then we have a strong pullback down to close to the lows that we got, that we initially moved up from. And if we if we have a look at what we, went through, back at the end of 2023, we saw that, we got a similar thing. We moved up from this low, we got a first high, we got a bit of a pullback, we got a second higher high, and then we moved back down close to these lows. Now, this is where the first deviation in our pattern happened, really, where we got this rally, and then we had the COVID sell-off, and we went even lower. And here, nothing happened. We just basically went sideways for this time. Now, I think that is basically that this price action was brought on by global events, like how global events often dictate, certain days in any market, that it influences the price of things. And obviously COVID was a terrible thing globally, and that caused big sell-offs. But over this 12-week time period, Cardano didn't really go anywhere in terms of from where it started to where it ended. It was a similar price. There was less than a cent of a variation. Now, this was when Cardano was trading at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cents. So, it's not, it wasn't nothing, but it was kind of close to nothing. And if we go back here, we can see that basically the same thing. The price didn't really move. And I would say that if we didn't have COVID, we probably would have seen a similar thing. 12 weeks here, 13 weeks here, basically the same time frame. And then we also get a really strong move after this 13-week period, straight up and tag a resistant line that we'd set all the way back at the start of 2023. We saw the same thing here. Basically, we went up from this low, had a really strong rally up, and hit a resistance line that we'd been setting basically ever since 2 years prior. But you can kind of, if you want to take it from this one, that's fine too. A while ago, basically. We then have our pull down like we saw here, and this is where we've really suddenly taken a big deviation. Now, one thing that I always had a problem with when I was making this comparison was kind of the time frames. The time frames during this cycle were much shorter compared to last cycle. And it was actually quite dramatic, around 25% of a difference. Because you can see from this low where we first start our comparison, our green circle, to this peak here, it took 85 weeks for Cardano to get there. However, the cycle that we're currently going through, it's taken Cardano 64 weeks to hit those same price movements. Now, I always said we had a very long bear run here. So it's kind of squishing this price movement into a more volatile, a shorter time period to account for this longer bear run. And that could be the case, because obviously you see here, this pull down, it dropped a lot lower in a lot shorter of a time frame. The last bear run, we dropped, percentage-wise, not as far, and it took us much longer. So I was accounting for, from peak to peak, it'll be 4 years. But here it's just, this has all happened over a longer time period, and on the way down and on the way up, we moved really quickly. And this cycle, it looks like we moved down slowly, but we'll probably get a quicker interim and a quick move up. That now doesn't seem to be the case. So whereas up to this point, we were being pretty damn quick, if we, project our white circle onto the new low that Cardano has just put in, that brings us 28 weeks after this previous high. Now, why does 28 weeks matter? Who cares? What's interesting about 28 weeks, if we measure the total time from our low here to, say, our final low before the bull run, it's 85 weeks plus 9 weeks, brings us to 94 weeks. If we take the same measurement here, we get our 64 weeks from our low to our high, and then we measure from the high to the low, that's 28 weeks. 64 plus 28, that's 92 weeks. 92 and 94 weeks are pretty similar, personally, if you ask me. So maybe now perhaps we're seeing Cardano more or less match its previous cycle, just in a bit of an odd way, where we got the same movements, but the first half was a bit compressed, and the second half was a bit elongated, or, the first 2/3 were compressed. The point I'm trying to make is we've seen all these key moves happen, excluding the COVID influence one. It's just the time between some of them isn't the same. But for a lot of them, they are the same. Like from the pre-COVID to the post-COVID low, 12 weeks, 13 weeks, I'd call that the same time frame. The time frame between the two initial peaks, the slightly higher high, that was 12 weeks. Here it was also 12 weeks. So maybe, sure, we account for a slight variance of a week or two. In the long run, it's 92 weeks here, it's 94 weeks here. Who really cares? I think the general picture of Cardano is that it's still following the previous pattern. Now, again, what I will say is that I don't think it's necessarily too wise to pull things like percentages from the previous cycle and try and project them onto this cycle. The reason I say that is because Cardano is a completely different asset to what it was back here. Just in terms of basic maths, it's got a much higher market cap now. The market cap is way higher than where it used to be. So you can't, a 100x here, not 100x, 100% move here, I really wouldn't be expecting that. I really would not. However, maybe there is something to be said about maybe mapping percentages. If this was a 100% move and this here was a 40% move, you could say, oh, well, we're getting 60% less of a move this cycle, but I think that gets very hairy quickly because it depends how you measure things. And you'll obviously find variance between different percentage moves. So that's not something I'm really going to look at least not with Cardano US dollar. But just for reference, just so you know what we're currently experiencing, say after this low, we eventually got a bit of a leg up above our previous high. That was almost a 100% move up. It was an 80% move from the open to the close over a 2-week period. Here, we'll take the best candles from open to close. We've got on a 30% move. So just letting you know, if you are holding Cardano and you're looking at the previous cycle and you're thinking, oh, well, all the moves have played out the same. And I think we are currently at this point of the cycle. Last time, at that point of the cycle, we moved up 2,000% until we reached the all-time high. So if I hold 1,500% from this point and sell then, I won't hit the top, but I'll guarantee a profit. That's definitely not the way to think. 100% no. I think Cardano will struggle to get much higher than its previous all-time high. And I'm saying that as an owner of Cardano. You know, I would love to just Cardano to the moon, Cardano to $10, Cardano to $100. I don't think it's going to happen. First of all, I just don't think Cardano is actually that hot. Now, I'd love to eat my hat over that. But I think Cardano actually attracts a different kind of... Cardano has taken always the very slow and steady way. You know, things are researched and developed before they're implemented. And because of this, things are slow. But you have things like Solana, which has definitely taken the spotlight in the crypto space over the last 2 years, really, ever since FTX, where it's been putting in new all-time highs already. And that's because they're constantly pumping out different things, but it's also because they're a younger coin. There's loads of different factors to it. It's also because there's now this narrative of, oh, you know, Ethereum is behind Bitcoin by one cycle and Solana is behind Ethereum one cycle. That might not be the case. People might completely forget about what Solana is by the time the next cycle rolls around. But it's got a lot of these narratives, and people like narratives like that because it gives them this like false sense of security. So I would caution you in assuming things are going to play out the same, because oftentimes they don't. It's only survivorship bias. Now, you know, even though I've just taken a shit on Cardano, really, I do think it is. I think you can make a lot of money with it, definitely. And I think if you hold it for the next few months, you're probably going to do well. I mean, if, you know, basically, if you've bought at any point since 2023, since 2022, realistically, you're probably in the green or break even or close, you know? And I think Cardano is going to do good. Like, just a little kind of thought experiment here. Not a thought experiment. But if we measure from where we started in 2023 to where we finished at the end of the year, Cardano moved up 140%. And note that we got the majority of the move really close towards the end of the year. And it was decent at the start, decent at the end. If we then take a look at how we did in 2024, we go from open to close. We did 84% of a move from open to close. If you just held the asset for this year, you bought on the first day of January and you sold on the 31st of December, you would have made 84% on your money. And note that we had a decently strong move at the beginning of the year, bit of a shit time after that, but then a brilliant move, you know, towards the end of the year. I mean, if you dollar cost average this and, you know, you spent most of your time buying Cardano below, you know, 55 cent here, which is what we opened at the beginning of the year. You know, you spent 7-8 months buying at, you know, say an average of 43 cents. And then at the end of the year, it moves up to $1.10. You've more than doubled your money. You've close to tripled it. I'm just saying Cardano has done well these last few years. And if you really just want to ignore all previous things with Cardano and just simply look at it like that, you know, there's a good chance that Cardano will do good again. And it's following a similar pattern as it has the last few years, where if we look at 2025, the start of it, we opened at $1.10. Now we're currently down 30%. But also, if we go from this year, last year, and we measure to July, we were also down, would you believe, 30%. So maybe this is a really good time to buy, if you want to just follow that logic, and then assume that, you know, come the fourth quarter of the year, you hope for some kind of explosive movement from Cardano. That could be it. I mean, if you want to get into macro and, you know, kind of global economics, you know, America's probably going to start printing money soon. And by printing money, I mean reducing interest rates. I think we're definitely going to see cuts this year. I mean, I don't know for sure. No one does, but I'd be pretty comfortable saying that. And historically, when rates have been cut, the market goes up, at least over the short term, short medium. Whether Cardano gets in on that action, I don't know, but there are a few things that indicate that Cardano might do well over the next 6 months. Are they guarantees? No. Do they all point to a similar time frame? Yeah, they do. But that's for you to decide. Before we wrap up, I want to show you the Cardano Bitcoin pair. Now, I always like to look at the Bitcoin pair when it comes to any altcoin, because I think this gives you a good indication as to how the crypto is holding up compared to the general market, or at least compared to, hard air quotes here, the safer bet. I wouldn't usually label Bitcoin as a safe bet, definitely not compared to traditional assets, but it's definitely the safe bet outside of stable coins in the crypto space. The first thing I want to point out is that during the time frame that we compare on the US dollar chart, we see a similar thing happen, where the first 2/3 of it are stretched out. So from this peak to kind of the second peak, I need to adjust this. It takes us 68 weeks. And then from that peak to then, when we break above that previous peak, it's plus 28 weeks, totaling to 96 weeks. Now, if we do the same thing here, let me just adjust this guy over here, bring him to match. The first part of the cycle is more compressed than this one. 68 weeks here, 51 weeks here, 17 weeks of a difference. However, the time that we've been going down for is already longer than what we experienced here. We bottomed out where, the time it took us to bottom out this cycle took the same amount of time for us to move past the previous high in the previous cycle. So we're already guaranteed basically for this part to be longer, if you're going to assume that these are going to match. I don't think they will identically in terms of move, but I think we will probably see some kind of a similar thing that we got on the US dollar chart, where we get a longer end, if you get me. It takes us longer to complete this whole move. Even though we see very similar moves happen, we get this kind of bowl here, and then we get another sharper move down. We get another sharper move down. I mean, the percentages are even similar on the Bitcoin, which I think is actually something that isn't unreasonable to compare. Because I think Bitcoin is such a stable asset in relation to the crypto space. I don't think you're going to have huge variations because, you will when an altcoin launches. You'll always get these kind of like heartbeat looking charts. But I think as time goes on, these kind of differences reduce. And I mean, a prime example of that is that the lowest and the highest prices Cardano ever experienced against Bitcoin were at the very beginning. And ever since then, it's only been putting in higher lows, so that's the good thing, but it's been putting in lower highs, which is the bad news for Cardano holders. And it's continuing to do that. Like this cycle here, we haven't gone down to the lows that we were at the cycle before. And I don't think it would be unreasonable to assume that we won't go back up to these highs on the Bitcoin pair. So, back to the original point I was trying to make. If we have 96 weeks here in total, how far do we need to bring this out to reach 96? We need to bring this one to 45, I'm pretty sure it is. So we bring this out to 45. Where does that put us? Would you have guessed Q4 of this year is when we get the rally up, which is again kind of in line, when we break above our previous high. So realistically, the rally up will happen sometime before that. Maybe this here is the start of our rally up. Who knows? Maybe we'll see another fake out and then drop back down and then move up. Maybe we'll get something completely new. I don't really know. Nobody does. But again, I would think the odds are on your side in terms of where I think Cardano will be at the end of the year. I think we will be at a higher evaluation against Bitcoin than 600 sats, which is where we roughly currently are, 650. Again, if you want to do a similar kind of comparisons to before, as where we take kind of the yearly moves from ADA Bitcoin, it's a different story actually. And it's not as jolly as the USD one. And that's, to be fair, Bitcoin has moved up really well over the last couple of years. and where dollar has been exposed to inflation and depreciation, especially recently, Bitcoin has gone up in value and has continued to follow the calculated, predetermined inflation rate that is a mystery to nobody, because it's public information when and how much Bitcoin is produced at any given time. But if we go from 2023, I'll take it from this guy here, and we go to the last week of 2024, we basically drop down ever so slightly. We dropped down 10% against Bitcoin. So if you held for the year in Cardano, you lost 10% to what someone who held Bitcoin for the year made. If we do the same job, where we go from the start of 2024 to the end of 2024, I mean, technically, well, no, we finish on the close, don't we? I'm going crazy. We get a 20% drop. So 10%, 20%, you're losing a good bit of money pretty quickly here. And there was at no point, if you bought at the beginning of the year for Cardano, for you to make a profit against someone who held BTC. From that point on, it was good luck, basically. Like, you were done. Unless you, day traded it here and sold here. That was technically the year before. You literally only had this week to make a profit against someone holding BTC. It's kind of slight variation. If you bought it open and sold at 20 sats higher, so, after that point, you could only lose money to someone who was holding BTC. This year, do I think it'll be the same? Very good question. I think no. I think we'll finish this year at a higher valuation against Bitcoin than where we started. And if we take the open or the first week, whatever, it's where we currently are, it's minus 40%. So it's funny how it's going, minus 10, minus 20, minus 40. I don't think we're going to finish the year at this price. I think we will most likely see a move up. And I just think that's because things are moving away from Bitcoin. If you want to look at things at a very broad sense, the altcoin index is going up. Bitcoin dominance has been going down. Very recently, it's taken a hit. Whether that's sustained or continued, I don't know. But again, these kind of things do suggest that money will move out of Bitcoin and into altcoins. And while Bitcoin will still most likely go up, altcoins will probably just go up at a higher rate. The same way that they go down much, much quicker compared to Bitcoin. Whenever this kind of move takes place, if it's going to take place, similar to one in the previous cycle, I would not expect us to come back to where we were before with the 6,250 sats price estimation. I don't think that's realistic. I would expect, again, for the volatility to reduce for Cardano Bitcoin as more time goes on. And so if you want to draw a very simple line and project where we might kind of be on Q1 of 2026, we'd be at around 4,000 sats. I think that's probably a decent estimation of where our peak could be, especially as our first high was around 8,000, our second was around 6,000, our third is probably going to be around 4,000, maybe it's 3,500, maybe it's 4,500, I don't know. I don't really care about the precise price, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to call the exact value of Cardano against Bitcoin for a specific day. I think it will be around here of a price sometime towards the end of this year. Maybe at the start, the beginning of 2026. Ultimately, no one knows until that happens. But if you did find this video useful, please consider subscribing. And if you felt like you got some insight, please consider giving it a share. Helps the channel hugely. Anyway, guys, take care and see you in the next one. Bye.